program, GATE, and the Connect Antigua and Barbuda initiative, etc. There has been a virtual collapse of the award-winning youth empowerment ICT programs, etc., etc. Now, if they were going to make a statement like that, one would assume that they would have gone and checked the facts. And I believe, and I thought, that we had dealt with this matter, with this whole ICT program and GATE and the funding issue that was surrounding it in our last budget debates in 2015. I really thought that we had dealt with this issue and put it away. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm mindful of the fact that yesterday you did advise my colleague that you cannot knock out a man twice. But this is a different innings. So permit me to deliver another knockout blow. Mr. Speaker, while I do not have an issue with the ICT cadet program that I met at the ministry, and we have continued by and large. I've said to all and sundry, it is a good program. We embrace it. It is good. I do not have a negative thing to say about the ICT cadet program. What we have, in fact, said, however, is that the funding mechanism was fraught with bad management and perhaps maybe even corruption. While we speak, while the UPP speaks about the award-winning GATE program, what they do not understand is that in all of the regional circles in which this matter had been presented and discussed, out of pure diplomatic sensibilities, people do not necessarily say to them what they have said to me. I have attended regional meetings at both CANTO, the Caribbean Association of National Telecommunications Organizations, at the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, and at the East Caribbean Telecommunications Regulatory Authority, ECTEL. And in each of these instances, they have said that while they appreciate the value of having such a cadet program, each of these governments have frowned upon the method of funding. And they laugh derisively. And they tell you that. And there's a reason why nobody else tried to replicate what was done here in Antigua. Because it was presented as something that should have been replicated. None of them accepted to do that. But we went into this issue at some length. And I know my colleague, Minister from St. Philip's North, would have another go at it and another stab at it when he presents in relation to the Antigua Public Utilities Authority. But safe to say, Mr. Speaker, that we have continued the GATE program. There have been at least 2 cadet cohorts that have graduated since I've been minister. This year, Mr. Speaker, in another few weeks, we will continue the cadet program on the different funding mechanisms. I made sure that in the preparations for our budget 2016, that sufficient allocation was put inside our internal budgets to ensure that we could at least fund the first cohort of ICT cadets at GATE this year. And there's a reason why we had to do that, Mr. Speaker, because in the scheme of things, it is this government's intention, and it would have been mentioned in the throne speech, and I believe Prime Minister Gaston Brown would have mentioned it as well in his presentation, to finally enact new telecommunications legislation this year, immediately upon the passage of the budget, when we return here for the new legislative agenda. We will be tabling for the first, second, and third reading the Telecommunications Bill 2016. And with that will come not only an independent regulatory commission for the first time, something that has eluded successive governments since 2001. But that bill gives the minister, the humble servant, the opportunity to bring into being a universal service fund. And the way the universal service fund works, Mr. Speaker, is that it will allow us to be able to derive up to 3% of the gross revenues of all the telecommunications companies. And that fund, Mr. Speaker, would allow us to treat the whole issue of the digital divide and empowering the young people without having to go to corrupt means of funding it. So I want to assure the public that not only have we continued the ICT cadet program, not only have we agreed to fund it in the first instance at the first half of this year, where we will begin the recruitment of the new batch of cadets for this new cohort, but we have expanded the program as well, because we have also now included one of our large technology partners in the firm of Microsoft. And we will begin to implement coding so that we can teach these young people now. At least we can put them on the first step of the escalator to fully participate in an emerging digital economy. This is not an easy job. But, Mr. Speaker, I thought I should just put that matter to rest. But in doing so, I just wanted to remind the public, the dirty clothes, the dirty underlinen that sat below the little princess that the UPP wanted to indicate was the ICT cadet program. The ICT cadet program was funded on the initiative called GATE to the tune of about $1 million over a 3-year period. Funds ran out sometime during the course of March last year. And that whole GATE program that involved the free provisioning of some tablets cost Digicel approximately $10 million. And what the government signed away, in exchange, it's $11,605,000. What the government signed away, I just wanted to remind the public, because I believe Mr. Lovell sometimes tends to forget that these records cannot be so easily expunged, as much as his memory tends to fail him from time to time. For $11,605,000, the government got 6,000, were supposed to be provided with 6,000 4G LTE tablets, computers, and dongles. They were supposed to get connectivity for these 6,000 computer tablets and dongles for 5 years, valued at $2.7 million. And the 6,000 4G LTE tablets were supposed to cost approximately $6.75 million. And they, of course, had to fund the ICT cadet program for 3 years at a tune of $1.155 million, and to fund the construction of a special needs resource center up to the tune of $1 million. The total value of the GATE deal was $11,605,000. What the government of Antigua and Barbuda, under the stewardship of the member for St. John's Rural West, gave away. And Mr. Speaker, I'm speaking of actual work that was done, that was presented to this Parliament before. But the commitments that the government gave was that it gave 5 years of corporate tax waiver, commencing April 2012, with an option to renew for another 5 years. And the estimated value for the first 5 years, based on work that I had done with my team and the Inland Revenue Department, based on the tax assessment up to the 3 previous years, worked out to be $16 million. So for $11.6 million, in one fell swoop, just on the corporate tax waiver, Digicel would have benefited from $16 million in potential tax revenues from this deal. But it didn't end here. Committed revenues from the connectivity of 6,000 tablets. It meant that Digicel would have earned back, they would have been able to charge $2.7 million against the ABST that they would have collected on the use of telephone services. They were granted full duty waiver on all 4G and 4G LTE capital equipment and 8 vehicles, furniture, equipment, and fittings for 2 new digital stores. Duty exemption for 1 year on 4G handsets and devices. Total value, as assessed by the Customs and Excise Division at the time, $661,000. Customs and Excise had indicated at the time we had done the valuation that the total drawdown on this particular set of waivers was the equivalent of $661,143. And that was assessed to date. International telecommunications license fees were also waived from 2012 to 2020. And that amounted to approximately $900,000. The mobile license fees was also waived from 2012 to 2020. And this amount should have been paid to APUA. It was estimated at $1.6 million per annum. That benefit over the period of 2012, the 8-year period, would have been equivalent to $14.4 million. And the waiver, this is most egregious, of all spectrum fees from 2012 to 2020 is equivalent to $27 million, bringing the total bonanza that Digicel would have enjoyed under this GATE project to $61.587 million. So when Mr. Lovell and the UPP speaks about this matter of the GATE program and the well celebrated, this is what they should talk about. The undergarment is dirty, it is filthy. And we have to heist up the can, you know. Yes. We're talking about it and see it. And we have to change it. We are going to fund a similar program and we're going to show them how it's done. When the telecommunications bill is passed and we have put in place a universal service fund, Digicel and Cable and Wireless, or Lime or Flow, whichever you choose, and APUA will contribute to that fund. And the government will have a clear revenue stream to be able to fund these type of projects at a minimal cost. And Mr. Speaker, if this was all, it would have been bad enough. But the competitor to Digicel said, well, if the tap is running, they may as well bring their bucket. They may as well bring their own bucket. And so Lion came up with a heart initiative and asked for a similar set of funding. And so for a total of $9 million that Lime contributed to the government. This is before we got here. The government also gave a waiver of import duty, ABST and RRC on 4G and 4G LD capital equipment and 10 vehicles, valued at $2.95 million. And again, that was the assessment to date at that point in time. The government also gave Lime exemption from the payment of corporate income tax for 5 years with an option for renewal for another 5 years. That was valued at about $20 million. The government gave a waiver on spectrum fees from 2014. See, they tried to circumscribe us from 2014, just a mere weeks before we came into government, valued at, it's shocking, $56 million, which meant that the total bonanza that Lime would have enjoyed, would have been $78.9 million for $9 million. Now, Mr. Speaker, when you consider for $9 million, Mr. Speaker, for $9 million, the GATE and the Heart initiative that Mr. Lovely is saying that we have discontinued in his own mind, his own warped mind. And it is a reason for them to march, and it is a reason for 1,500 or 3,000 or whatever the number is, to get on the street in St. John's and parade themselves. Because in 18 months, we have made changes. What he's actually saying is that it was correct for the government to get $9 million in benefit and charge it on the public account for nearly $80 million. You do the math, Mr. Speaker. $78.947 million. I need not say to you, Mr. Speaker, that at the end of last year, the end of 2014, the cabinet, the Antigua, the Gaston Brown cabinet, did consider and did repudiate those two agreements. We're in the process of putting in place new arrangements to ensure that in this year, when we move towards the new telecommunications environment, that not only will these international companies have to pay their taxes, as they would everybody else, but they're going to have to pay for their spectrum fees, and they're going to have to pay the license fees. When we were doing the budget preparations, I served on the subcommittee of finance. I did indicate that one of the revenue streams that we had to put is that we had to book back in the government finances telecommunications fees. If, Mr. Speaker, I was supposed to go through the record, and I do not have it, but I can fairly recover from my memory bank, that is a paltry sum that is shown in the revenue estimates for the government. Very paltry sum for telecommunications under that head. Less than $500,000 per year. And we know that telecommunications, like tourism, like petroleum, are three of the most profitable businesses worldwide. Mr. Lovell and the UPP cannot expect to convert their shame. The shame of this arrangement. They cannot expect now to convert the shame of these arrangements and call it virtue. So, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to move away from that whole shameful expose that I had to do.